So once again, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sasha Ponappa, and I am the Executive Director of DOF, Deaf Organization Fund. And we are here talking in today's webinar about the 2025 Impact Grants. I am a brown woman with wavy brown hair, wearing a blue shirt. Behind me is some pictures and some plants on a shelf. DOF just launched our 6th round of funding last week, and this is for deaf-centric programs and organizations. We are looking to invest $25,000 each in 5 organizations starting in January 2025. And so that's what this call is about, to answer any questions and to talk a little bit about these grants. So a little bit about DOF before I dive into the grant information. DOF, Deaf Organization Fund, goal is to strengthen organizations within the deaf community. Our vision is to have a future where deaf organizations can thrive with resources that are provided by many different organizations. If you see our logo here, it is our deaf community and 2 hands signing the sign of community, because that's really the point of this work, is the community. Just a little bit about our grant journey. We officially started in 2021. But we did have a grant distribution program in 2020, which was accessing that content. You can see in this bar graph. Let me explain what this bar graph is here so everybody can access it. So we gave out funding since 2020. And since that time, we did $20,000 in 2020, $107,000 in 2021. Again, I'm sorry, 50,000 in 2021, 107,000 in 2022. In 2023, we did 100,000, and earlier this year in 2024, we awarded $110,000. So you see all of this here. You see the 4 to 6 organizations that have been donated to throughout these tenure of 5 grant cycles. And now we're working on our 6th cycle. The number of organizations, the number of funds that we have been getting has been more than 215 organizations that have requested funding. And some of these organizations have received funding from us more than once. Our grantees are from all over the United States. Some of them are small organizations. Some of them are organizations that have been around for a long time. Some of them are volunteer run. There really is a change. So the grants are only up for projects that will last 1 year. If you're looking at fundraising and donating for a sustainability program, that's a longer project. And right now our grants are for 1 year only, with the hopes of expanding that in the future. And those future grants will be hopefully 3 to 5 years. So keep in mind that every year our grants are looking and our cycles are critical. We want to make sure that what the criteria is for each of these organizations before you apply, that you fit those criteria. So again, we are looking to fund 4 to 6 deaf-centric organizations and programs. Deaf-led programs can be under the umbrella of a hearing organization. So throughout my presentation, you will see me talk about deaf organizations or deaf programs. We do not fund businesses and companies. This is solely non-for-profit. Our funds are $25,000 per awardee. January of 2025 is when we will award that money, and you will have 1 year to complete the cycle of that grant and spend that money on your project. You must submit your application prior to 5 p.m. October 9th, Central Time. You can access our application and all of the materials in American Sign Language, English, and Spanish. You can also respond to your application in English, American Sign Language, or Spanish. The grant website link will be put into the chat, and on that link, you'll see all of the information regarding this grant opportunity. A little bit about our timeline. There are 3 components to the grant cycle. Last week, September 4th, is when we opened our application window. September 4th until October 9th, applications will be accepted. Again, they must be received before 5 p.m. Central Time, October 9th. Then, October 10th through December, we will start the review process of the applications. The Grant Review Committee, as well as DOF staff, board, and our parent organization, Communication Service for the Deaf, will evaluate and determine who are the final grantee recipients for the $25,000 to be given in January. This is the timeline that we follow. The goal for funding this year is unrestricted funding. Unrestricted funding is funding that can be used to support the global mission of the organization, meaning there are no rules governing how to use these grant dollars or how they are spent, as long as it aligns with the organization's mission and operations. And this is wonderful. Unrestricted funds can cover current priorities of things that you need. It can cover future long-term or sustainability needs. And, often grants, funders, organizations, there are costs that are necessary. And they all say that only 10% of a grant can be unrestricted. The rest has to be used otherwise. That is not how we're doing this program. So unrestricted funding is amazing. So with past applicants, people were like, $25,000, great. Can we use it for A, B, C, D, E, F, G? And the grant review committee looks through all of that, and we figure out what they're asking for, determine the organization's staff, resource, bandwidth, to make sure that all of those requests can be met within 1 year time period for the $25,000. That means we're looking at the feasibility of the grant that you're requesting. And that's something that we use to evaluate the grant. You're looking at the full picture, the organization, the staff. Can this program work within the staffing functions that this organization has, and is it feasible? Also, an opportunity to think about how you can use this funding best to support your organization, being creative, keeping in mind DOF and our mission is to strengthen organizations. This is not the first time that we've done unrestricted. We did unrestricted with our 2023 grantees. We have funded their projects that they were working on. My coworker, Avi, will put in a link to last year's grant recipients. Now, what can we fund? Again, you have to look at the criteria, and we have to make sure that the criteria fits in prior to applying. If you don't fit, then you really can't apply. We have 2 key requirements to meet for eligibility, and these 2 criteria are: your organization or program leaders must be deaf-centric. And let me again explain that deaf-centric means that at least 50% of the organization or the program leadership, for example, the executive director, the staff, advisory committee, board, those people are members of the deaf community. And the organization or program must primarily serve the deaf community. And again, members of the deaf community are people who are deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, or hearing or hard of hearing. A question that we often receive is, I'm a CODA. I'm a hearing person who signs. I'm an interpreter. Can we apply? Absolutely. You can apply if 50% of the organization or program's leadership is deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, or hard of hearing. Second criteria is that your organization must be a 501c tax exempt status under the IRS, meaning the IRS has identified you as a nonprofit. If you do not have the 501c3, then you must have a fiscal sponsor that is a 501c3 who is willing to sponsor you and utilizing their status under the IRS. If you don't have your own 501c3 or you don't have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor as a nonprofit, then you cannot apply for these grants. Another question that we received that came up with the registration regularly: can my deaf school, university, deaf-centric program within a university apply? If your school, university, or program has a 501c3 tax exempt status, then yes, you can apply. And it is deaf-centric. The school, the university, the program must be 50% deaf-led and have that 501c3 criteria. If you meet both of those criteria, then absolutely you can apply. Okay, these are things that we cannot fund. I'll give you a moment to read this. So again, an organization must have a 501c3 tax status, tax exempt, or have a fiscal sponsor. If you don't have either one of those, then you are not eligible to apply. This includes international organizations outside of the United States. They must have a United States fiscal sponsor with a tax exempt 501c status, C3 status. So, often we get these international organizations and they're trying, and they had their 501c3 when they set up. And for whatever reason, they no longer have that status. Maybe they didn't file their annual tax paperwork, which is the 990, and therefore they lost that tax status. When you submit your organization, you must make sure that your 501c3 status is still valid. We are verifying that. You can look at the IRS website. We are using GuideStar, and we are using different organizations within here to make sure that you are at a valid 501c3 organization. And so with a capital funding project, you could use this for construction, for building office space. That's not eligible for our grant funding. It's not for a capital project. If it's a one-time event, such as a festival or a camp or a conference, this grant is not intended for that. This is supposed to strengthen an organization, not to fund a one-time event. However, should your organization want to provide services and resources or outreach for a specific population within the community that you serve, and part of your strategic plan is to host monthly workshops, trainings, provide resources to that community for outreach purposes during a 1-year period, then absolutely you can apply and that qualifies for this grant. It is something that if it's just something that's going to happen one time and not again, then it does not qualify for this grant. Finally, we do not fund individuals that are involved in nonprofit organizations, such as I'm a college student that's looking for scholarships to pay for college. It's for myself, it's not for the nonprofit. Then no, we can't fund that. Or I'm an individual looking to buy hearing aids for myself personally. We cannot fund that. But if you are an organization that want to pay for an independent contractor, such as a bookkeeper, to help manage the funds of your nonprofit, that is allowable. Or if you're an organization that you're going to pay someone to be a train the trainer type sense, or to train the board or the staff, yes, we can use that. If you want to increase pay or hourly wages for your staff, this grant is allowed to do that. Again, whatever you're looking to do, it has to be within the organization itself. It's not for an individual or for their individual personal gain. Okay, now that I have explained what is covered for the grant, what we can fund and what we can't fund, now let's talk a little bit about the application. It's a very important part of this process. You must create and have an account on Submittable. This is DOF's application platform. This is where you will submit your application. There are two parts to this process. One is the account holder versus the collaborator. The account holder, we encourage that person to be someone within your organization, the executive director, a staff member, a board member. Because if you are awarded, this account holder is how we're going to get all of that award information. All of the temporary and final reporting information happens within Submittable. So that needs to be somebody within your organization. If you have somebody else helping with your with your grant writing, maybe it's a board member, a contract writer, a staff member, they become a collaborator. And within the submittable platform, on the top right-hand side, there is a link that says invite collaborator. When you click on that, it'll send the link to whomever you request. They accept, and now they're able to work together to help you create and write the application. So when it's time to submit, the account holder is the one that must click the button that says submit. If you need to submit your platform in an alternative format because of accessibility reasons, please email DOF and we will work with you to make that happen. So now you've created your account and you've gotten into Submittable. It's time to submit your application. So you're going to see two different sections. There is the eligibility, which is those criteria that we talked about, and then the actual application. You must meet our eligibility criteria. If you meet all of these, then you will see our application. If you don't meet eligibility criteria, you will not see the application. This will stop your process right there. The eligibility criteria will talk about your employee identification number. This is the federal number that the IRS gave to you when you set up your organization. If you have a fiscal sponsor or another nonprofit who is taking on the responsibility for this grant, then you need to utilize their EIN. And then there'll be 4 questions that talk about the eligibility. And we just reviewed that in previous slides. So should your eligibility meet, then you will see the application. And there will be 4 parts to the application. That is the organization's profile, the organization's overview, the proposal, and the optional questions. The first three are required. Optional questions are not. It's whether or not you wish to answer them. I'm going to explain a little bit more about each of these four things. So the first section in the organization's profile, this is where we are collecting just basic information about your organization. Name of the organization, contact people within the organization, website, address. We know since COVID-19, more and more organizations are now operating virtually, and you don't necessarily have a in-person physical address. So your address must be the organization's legal address that is utilized when filing your annual IRS paperwork, or the address that you use on a bank statement. If you're volunteer run, often you don't have an office either. But again, think about the address that you use for bank statements and IRS funding, and whatever professional affiliation you have, where they're working. Where did somebody work before for each of your board of directors? I don't want just the names of board of directors. I need all of the names as well as their board title and where they're currently or previously employed. The organization's legal status. This is very important, especially if you're utilizing a fiscal sponsor. If you're using a fiscal sponsor, that's where you're going to put that company's EIN, their name, their information, and that you have an agreement with this fiscal sponsor that you can utilize their EIN for purposes of applying for the grant. Next is your annual operating budget. And there'll be some drop downs there for you to fill in with different financial ranges that your budget is. Pick the one that best reflects your organization's annual operating budget. And then the last question in this particular section is a conflict of interest. It's a COI. And this is a new question that we're asking starting this year on the application. All organizations must disclose if you have any COIs with our grant review team, DOF, or with the parent organization, CSD. We want to make sure that this process is fair and transparent. Just because you have disclosed a COI does not disqualify your application. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue with this presentation. One question that I do receive a lot, and saw it when we were registering for this webinar, is do I need to upload documents, financial information about the organization? No, if you're using a fiscal sponsor. No, you don't need any of that. You just need the fiscal sponsor agreement. If you have that, if you are using one, then you must have a fiscal sponsor agreement. Other than that, there are no other documentation of financial information that needs to be submitted. The next section of your application is the organization overview. There are 5 questions that are required. Questions regarding your mission, the communities you serve, organization leadership, equity efforts, and organization's accomplishments. If you are a new organization and you've just started, then let us know what accomplishments you're hoping to have in the future. You can submit your responses in American Sign Language, English, or Spanish. If you choose English or Spanish, then just type. You have 250 words per question. The platform will cut you off at 250. It won't allow anything more than that. If you do it in American Sign Language, you can sign a video response and upload that to a YouTube channel, and then copy the YouTube URL link and post it into that particular question. 250 words per question, or 1.5 minutes per video response. Maybe some questions you choose to answer in English and others you choose to answer in American Sign Language, all in English, all in American Sign Language. It is up to you. The intent is one language per question, but you can use multiple languages within each section. So the proposal is what you're asking for. And there are 3 questions in this proposal that are required. The first is how much money you're asking for. What is the impact of the award should you be granted? And how will you utilize the funds? The first one, how much you're asking for, is just a dollar amount. Just type in a dollar amount. The maximum allowed you can type in is 25,000. The final 2 questions in this section could be English, Spanish, or ASL. If you pick ASL, you have 3-minute video to describe what you want. If you are typing in English, you have 500 words. Again, you could answer question 2 in English, question 3 in ASL, vice versa, all in English, all in ASL or Spanish. Just pick one language per question. On this question number 2, as far as what is the impact on the award, we encourage you to be very clear and specific. For example, my organization will use the funding for training. Great. Tell me what the training is for. What type of training is going to be happening? Who is going to be taking this training? What will the training provide as impact to your organization? So tell us all of the details. Question number 3 is, how are you going to use the funds? We are looking at a high-level summary. Timeline, activities, how you're using the fund. I don't need a breakdown of $25,000 and where every penny is being spent. If you have a project, you don't need to upload a project budget spreadsheet. It could look like something like 15% of this award will go to project X. 10% will go to project Y. Or you could use dollar amounts to say, I will use $10,000 for this particular area. I will use $8,000 for this area, and then I'll use $5,000 for that. So just again, putting it all together. So those are the first 3 sections, and all of these sections are required. The last section is completely up to you, and it is optional. You decide if you wish to answer or not. And there are 4 questions within this. You can answer all 4. You can answer 1, 2, or none. It just helps DOF's team to understand how to develop resources to support you and other deaf organizations and programs. The 4 questions are as follow. Do you have any additional information to share with us? Do you have any feedback about the application process? If you are using this money, what types of training would you like to see from DOF? And if you'd like to participate in the virtual community hub or other deaf organizations to share information, and are you interested in joining? That last question is the only question that is multiple choice. You can choose that. Questions 1, 2, and 3 are open-ended, and you have 100-word maximum to type into that, or a 1-minute ASL video. Application is completed. You're ready to submit. What's next? That's our part. That's the grant review process. And there are 2 key parts to that. There is the evaluation rubric and the conflict of interest. And I'm going to explain each of those. Your application will be evaluated using an evaluation rubric. The person who evaluates will depend on the COI, the conflict of interest. It's important that you look at the matrix within the evaluation rubric. That matrix is what helps us to evaluate your application. If you are aware of how it's being evaluated, it will help you. There are 4 areas that we are evaluating on: equity, impact, community leadership, and feasibility. The evaluation rubric basically is a spreadsheet with each of the words and how we define each of these words, and then 1 through 4 as a rating scale, 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest. So at the end of the column, we translate each of these sections in American Sign Language so that you have it in English, Spanish, and sign language. And it's important for you to look at this so you know how you're going to be evaluated. This is on the DOF website as well as on the submittable platform. As you look through all of this, if you have any questions, email, and we'll be happy to answer them. Okay, so my application is being evaluated on these 4 areas of the rubric. Great. Who's evaluating my application? There are 5 community members on our DOF application evaluation committee. They are members of the deaf community with nonprofit experience. And all of the evaluators will use that evaluation rubric. They will then be categorized and finalized and given to the CSD board. We will filter through them and narrow it down to 4 to 6 recipients. We know the deaf community is small and there's a lot of overlap. Now, understand, an applicant cannot contact anybody from the review committee, DOF, the board, CSD, prior to making funding decisions. You cannot reach out to us once you have made an application for the grant. And because the community is so small, we want to make sure that the evaluation process is fair and transparent. And the way we do that is that we ask all applicants to disclose if you have a conflict of interest with anyone involved. For example, a conflict of interest could be the applicant organization, my partner is an advisor at DOF. So therefore, there's family relationship there. Another example, an applicant organization, someone on the grant review committee is a director or an officer or a consultant or an agent, a staff member, or something having to do with the organization that is applying for grant. So you need to disclose that. Just because you've disclosed it doesn't mean that you're disqualified. It just helps us and DOF to take the appropriate actions, such as if the applicant organization has a COI with a particular person, then that person won't review the application. No problem. We just want to make sure that it's equitable and fair. Now, once we've narrowed it down to 4 to 6 recipients, we now announce what's going to happen. So you have this in January of 2025 through December of 2025, there will be 2 reports required. A 6-month report, which we call an interim report, and a final report. And that's when the program is finished and you are done with your grant awards. You can meet with the DOF team. It doesn't have to be, all the time. It can be once a month, once a quarter, or never. But if you want to do that, if you're needing support, if you have challenges or any other opportunities, you're welcome to meet with us and we are here for you. Now, I have given my presentation. I want to take an opportunity now to answer your questions. Again, a friendly reminder. The platform is intended for broad, general questions about the grant, the application, any specific questions about your organization or your program. Please set up a time to meet with us. You can email us or we can meet with you via Zoom. If you've asked your questions in English, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a button that says Q&A. Please type your questions there. If you want to ask your questions in American Sign Language, then at the very bottom, you see a button that says Raise Hand. It looks just like that. Click on that button and my team will promote you to become a panelist. And when it is your turn, You will turn on your video and be able to sign your question. Make sure that we understand the question. We will then ask you to turn your video off and we will respond to that question.
Okay. I was just wanting to know that if I put down those hard costs to upgrade a literacy class for deaf adults, but then after a while, I end up receiving your grant, then am I able to change the goals of the organization from deaf adults literacy class to a deaf adults digital literacy class? Is that a possibility? Would I have the flexibility to make those changes?
Just to make sure that I understood your question, you would be applying for a grant because you want to set up a deaf literacy class. And then later you change and decide it to be a deaf digital class.
Yes, I would like it computer based, but still a literacy class.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to have you turn off your video now, please, and I'll answer your question.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. So I will again repeat the question. The question is, if you apply for a deaf literacy class and then receive the grant, but then want to utilize it for a digital class regarding digital literacy, is that permissible? Considering this is unrestricted funding, it is there to support your organization. There are some flexibilities if you realize that what you were originally planning to do doesn't work out. The importance is to meet with the DOF team first to discuss what the changes are that you're wanting to do, and then we'll let you know whether or not that is approved. Okay, next we have a question, and this is a question in the Q&A, I see. One person is asking, how strict is the requirement that 50% of the organization's leadership identify as members of the deaf community? That is one of our criteria, and it must be 50% or more deaf-led, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, or hard of hearing. So that is a very strict criteria. Okay, now we have a question. Octavio will be promoted to a panelist so that they can turn on their video.
Hello,
Hello.
can you see me clearly?
Yes, I can see you.
Hello, my name is Octavio. This is my sign name. I'm from New Jersey. I was just wondering, so if we're trying to set up a national organization, because I've learned so much from CCSL, but if we want to do maybe some consulting or because some of us are kind of new, we're not really sure how to establish this or write a grant. If we were wanting to do some consulting, and if we were awarded this grant, do we have to pay that money back or do we still work together as we develop for success?
So just to clarify, your question is, are there resources to support you with setting up an organization to help write DOF grants? And then if you get the money, do you give the money back is to the person who was the consultant for you? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So before the money is awarded, those 4 to 6 people, do you guys do any one-on-one consultations prior to that?
Okay, I'll have you turn your video off so I can answer the question.
Thank you.
So Octavio's question is, does DOF have resources to support providing consultancy for new organizations in writing grants? And if we win the grant, Can we use that funding to pay for the consultant? Prior to the grant, no, we have no resources in-house to help with consulting for writing the grant, applying for the grant. We are intentionally keeping our applications very broad and simple so an organization can respond in one of three languages. Once the grant has been awarded and you have built-in consulting services within your project, within your budget, and you feel that it's important that you want to apply for consulting services and using that funding for your consulting services, then that is possible because it would align with the project that you're applying for a grant for. All right, next question. The question is, are government agencies, schools for the deaf eligible, or do they have to be a 501(c)(3) organization? There are some schools that are 501(c)(3) entities, and they can apply. But yes, you must be a 501(c)(3) entity in order to apply. If you don't have 501(c)(3) status and you don't have another nonprofit that is sponsoring you as the fiscal sponsor, then you are unable to apply. All right, I see Lewis's hand raised. So Lewis is being promoted. Hello, Lewis.
Hello. Okay, you ready? I want to commend this project. It's very helpful. But my question is, my organization has several projects and we really don't know what the budgets of them. Are we able to ask for a maximum of 25,000 regardless of what the budget is for each of those projects? Because I don't know how much they cost.
Okay, so you have multiple projects and you want to apply for 25,000 for each of them?
Oh, no, no, 25,000 in totality.
25,000 for all of them?
So are you asking for specific amounts or can I just ask for the maximum of 25,000? And then, I don't know what the cost of those each projects are going to be, but I would like to allocate between those five projects. Do I have to put down a specific amount for each of those projects or can I just put a general number?
Okay, I'm gonna have you turn off your video so I can answer your question. Thank you. So Lewis's question is, my organization has a multitude of projects. And if I have the 25,000, do I have to break down how much of that 25,000 will go towards each project? Again, we're looking for a high level summary. So if if you have multiple projects, you can tell us the timelines, the activities. And again, this is in your application. Let us know the timelines, the activity, the high level amount for each of those projects. And whatever information you can give us will help us to evaluate better. It's a little bit harder to evaluate if you don't tell us anything. So if you want, I mean, one of my examples in my presentation was a high level summary. You could say 10% for, for two projects, 20% for one project. Sorry, my math isn't working out. Or you can say 10,000 for this, 5,000 for this, 7,000 for that. The more information you give us, the better we are able to evaluate your project. So thank you for your question. All right, now we're going to go back to the Q&A. The question is about the 990 documentation. Is that required? So a 990 documentation, that is your annual IRS paperwork that you file. That is different from your tax determination letter. The tax determination letter for the IRS that gives you the 501c3 status. Every year you have to file your 990 in order to maintain that status. We are not asking for you to upload the 990 because our platform will help us to find your 990 on the IRS, because we can use the Guide Star as well to help us with that. Some organizations fundings don't have good standings because they haven't filed their 990s annually. My organization, 501c3, I know that that is applicable, but you don't necessarily need to send us a copy of the 990. Okay, we have no other ASL questions. We have about 8 minutes left. I can continue with the other questions in Q&A. All right, so a question from Shelley. If using a fiscal sponsor, does the 50% deaf-centric rule apply to both entities, my organization and the sponsoring organization? And does the 503C need to be in place for a certain amount of time prior to application? What if you've just received it or if you've had it for a long time? So the 50% deaf-centric leadership organization program, etc., is for your program that is applying for the funds, not the fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor is just being willing to allow you to use their number for dollar awards. But you are the one that is applying, and therefore you are the one that has to have the 50% deaf-centric. The 501c3 status, we have some organizations that have had this status for a long time and others that have just received their status a few months ago. It doesn't matter. The 501, as long as you have the 501c3 and it is active at the time of application, then that is what matters. Okay, Clarkson. The question is a new organization able to apply for these grants if they have just received their 501(c)(3) last February? Yes. It is important that you have your 501(c)(3) status. When you type in your EIN, your employee identification number, which is given to you by the IRS, that is the number that you're going to utilize on your application. If you're struggling, you're not sure, email DOF with your EIN and we can help you. If you have any problems, just reach out to us. You do not have to have any 990s ready to go. You'll need to do them by next year, though. There is a question from Jennifer Hess asking, can two deaf organizations apply together for a grant? Absolutely. But when it's time for awardee, the money is only going to go to one organization. And then the two of you have to have an agreement of how to share those funds. Your application, we only ask for the EIN of one entity. Contact information, project scope, etc., can be coming from the other organization, but the awardee will only be to one organization. We have about 4 minutes left. All right, here's a question from Diana asking, are you okay with fundraising for a funding for a fundraising consultant? Yes. Grant writers, other types of people like that, you can use the funding for that because that can support the overall organization. We have a question from Clement. I have a question regarding projects, and it's kind of vague, because you don't support a one-time event. Can you elaborate on that? And so if it's just a one-time conference or a festival that's going to be one and done, then no, we are not able to fund that. This grant is intended to strengthen the community, strengthen the organization over an entire year's period. Now, if you are hosting events monthly or quarterly for a particular population within your community, then yes, you can definitely ask money for that because it's for your organization serving the community over a time period. Oh, one question just came in. Are there any types of organizations who have met the eligibility criteria that you did not fund? For example, political affiliations, animal rights, deforestation projects, or anything like that, that you would not fund? Nope, we just follow those two criterias. Is your organization 50% deaf-centric? And are you primarily serving the deaf community? Again, it must be people that you're providing services to the deaf community. And then, of course, you have to be a 501c3. Political affiliates are typically, you can't use nonprofit funding for political lobbyists. And so, no, you cannot lobby with funding that is received from these grants. All right, I think that is everything. It is 3 o'clock now, or at least 3 o'clock Eastern time. If you have any additional questions that we have not had an opportunity to answer, please email us at dof@deforganizationfund.org. I will show the slide that has the web address on it. So again, this is important. Since you registered for the registration, you will be able to get a copy of this presentation. But as you see here, the bit.ly email address is the grant overview. If you click on that first link, you will see everything from our website in English, in Spanish, as well as in American Sign Language. You can review the application before you actually apply. And then again, how to contact us if you have any general questions or anything specific with your project, then this is the deaf organization, dof@deforganizationfund.org. If you have any problems with submittable, then please use the second link here. If you don't get a response within a day or so, please reach out to us and let us know, and we'll try to help you with your issue. So when the webinar is closed, you will receive a survey, and you will also get a survey in your email within 24 hours. That survey is about your experience and feedback on this webinar. This is our first time hosting a webinar like this, and your feedback is so important to us for our webinars and for the grant efforts. Thank you so much for coming today and for being a part of our webinar. We really appreciate it. It's important that you submit your application before 5 p.m. Central Time on October 9th. Utilizing the submittable platform. We look forward to hearing from you and learning more about your organizations and your programs. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.